pat on brands. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Let it be branded, man. Pat from the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous.
Last number, Brapet. So exciting to see. That's 5 awards down. Just 10 more to go. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. The man I'm about to introduce is a man that needs no introduction, but, you know, we're going to give him one because I think introductions speak to the journey you've walked. It allows us to affirm you. It allows us to acknowledge you and all that you have done. He is a man in the marketing space that some people call Mr. Brands. Others call him Mr. Marketing, the Yelleding. Mr. Thebe Ikalafeng is the preeminent global African thought leader and authoritative voice in branding in Africa. Not South Africa, the entire continent. In a distinguished career of over 25 years, Mr. Ikalafeng has written extensively. He's addressed diverse audiences globally and has been quoted widely on all matters regarding brands and intellectual property law in Africa. And tonight he will be giving us his keynote address. On a very personal note, I've never met Mr. Ikalefeng personally. I follow him from a distance, and his knowledge and passion for the African continent and its people and the works of their souls is awe-inspiring. He's a storyteller of note, even from a caption. I can only imagine when he's speaking, and a man of many impactful actions and words. Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding and welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Thebe Ikalafeng.
Hey, she shake her ass friend like I do. Very analog, Thebe. Pat, this is incredible. This is superlative. Because we spoke about this during COVID. And I didn't imagine this. Not that I didn't imagine you capable of this, but I didn't imagine our people acknowledging how great they are, the way they are. So on the 24th of May, 1963, a few of our forefathers, led by Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie, they got together to talk about what we need to do for this continent. He addressed 32 countries and he had a simple agenda for them. He had a simple agenda for us. 5 of the things that he quoted or that he laid down as a foundation for the continent were: we need to create a common market for the continent. We need to have our own African currency. We need to have our own Central African Bank. We need to have a common African citizenship. And we need to have a common defense. He did not anticipate that for me to go to every country as I have in the continent, I would need 30 to 40 passports, 30 to 40 visas. He did not anticipate that as I move around the continent, I will use 30 to 50 currencies just to get around. He did not anticipate that when I landed in Somalia, in Mogadishu, in the middle of all those bombs, that the first fleet I would see would be an army from the United Nations, not an African army. He did not anticipate that as an African, if I want to go sell goods from Cape to Cairo, I'll have so many hurdles as a salesperson, as an African in my own continent. He also did not anticipate that we would need a reminder from Thabo Mbeki in 1996 at the launch of the South African Constitution, a reminder of the beauty, the history, and the diversity of the continent with his great I'm an African speech. When he spoke that freedom was a necessary condition for human existence. I didn't always set out to travel the continent or to get into the continent as much as I have. But in 2003, Thabo Mbeki gave a speech at the Indaba. And he spoke about what he would do if he had time to take away from his chores as a president of the Republic of South Africa. And he said, I'd like to take a break from my work as a president and to rediscover myself as a person among other people in the rest of the continent. He said, I would want to wander to the great markets of the pulsating African city of Lagos, where Patrick and I were last week for the launch of the top 100 brands in the continent. He said he'd like to go down the extraordinary Ngorongoro crater to look at in Tanzania, to look at men, the Maasai, living side by side with the lions at peace, sharing the same space peacefully, to visit the library of Timbuktu, where the ancient books, the manuscripts dating back over 8 centuries, or to Gorée in Senegal, the place where African slaves were transported out of Africa. But we are still enslaved as Africans because we have not quite left Gorée yet. We have not quite come back yet from Gorée. So I was sitting and judging International Entrepreneurship Awards about 7 years ago in Switzerland. It was myself, a professor from London School of Economics and a professor from Harvard Business School. The three of us were judging the 1,000 smartest PhDs from Ivy League schools in the world. They were tasked with the responsibility to come up with solutions to solve the problems of the world. Before we got on to judge, there were people there was a panel ahead of us. And the panel consisted of just one person and one anchor from, I think from BBC. And the lady was sitting there. Her name was Fu Ying, Madame Fu Ying from the Chinese Communist Party. And Madame Fu Ying spoke. It was being interviewed. They finished the conversation. As she finished the conversation, a young European man doing his PhD at St. Gallen, St. Gallen is one of the prestigious schools in Switzerland, put up his hand and said, Madame, you are sitting there talking so much about the greatness of China, yet your country is oppressing people in Tibet. Madame Fu Ying allowed the man to express himself as the young people do. Story of how bad China is, how great Europe is, and all those. And he asked the young man a simple question when he finished. Have you been to Tibet? And the young man says, no, madam, I have not. Madame Fu Ying said, how dare you sit there and express yourself about another country when you yourself have never been there? Because my parents are from Tibet. I know Tibet. I learned at that day not to express myself about my continent, about any part of the world, but any person before getting on that journey. And then in 2013, I had coffee with the CEO of Samsung. And I'm speaking about different brands, country brands, people brands, and all those. And the CEO of Samsung, KK Park, then was the CEO of Samsung for the continent. And I was preparing an article on brands in the continent. And I said to Mr. KK Park, Samsung is so successful, Mr. Park. So successful every single part of the continent, everywhere people go. I said, I've only been to 20 countries in Africa, or 23 countries in Africa, maybe 15, I don't even know how many then. And he said to me, oh, but Thebe, I've been to every country in the continent. And I sat there and I was like, wow. I said, every country in the continent? He says, yes. And he said, you see, Thebe, the reason we are so successful at Samsung is because we look at opportunities differently. We go to these countries. We go to where the people are. We go eat where they eat, sleep where they sleep, shop where they shop. When the lights go down, we don't blame Eskom. We see an opportunity for a solar project. And I learned something about entrepreneurship and about solving problems and about brands. That the challenge that we face as Africans, the challenge that we're trying to solve today with the top 16, is the problems that we are facing today. The problems that Kwame Nkrumah thought we would have solved more than 60 years later are because we as Africans look at the challenges of the continent, the challenges of our country, the challenges of our cities, and we abdicate our responsibilities as entrepreneurs, as thinkers, to politicians. We abdicate our responsibilities to others. So when the other brands come in, like Samsung, to explain, and that explains why. In the survey that I've started 12 years ago, Brand Africa 100 Africa's Best Brands, which is the most authoritative survey in the whole worldwide on brands in the continent, quoted by everybody else from Cape to Cairo and from east to west of the world. And when we do that survey, it explains why Samsung is one of the 83% of the top 100 brands in the continent that Africans admire. So in our survey, we've discovered in the last 12 years that everybody here in this room here, this continent, 83% of you are rejecting everything that is made in Africa. Because 83% of you, when a young man called Tshepo Jeans came up with a jean and priced it at $5.99, because you've got megaphones called cell phone and Twitters and Instagram and all those, you ran onto the radio channels and you said, I will not support a brand by a person called Tshepo who grew up in Tsakani, my neighbor, Besiamba Sonke. I am not going to buy a jean for $5.99 because Markham can give it to me for $3.99. And then two things transformational happened. Meghan Markle came to South Africa. And Meghan Markle came to South Africa, went over to Tshepo Jeans, and as a token, bought a pair for Archie and for herself. A second transformational thing happened. Cassper Nyovest had an opportunity, as many rap artists do or hip hop and anyone those have. He had an opportunity to do what most of us in this room do, to run to Gucci, to run to Louis Vuitton, to run to Hermes, to run to all those, and go dress up because Beyonce is going to be here, Jay-Z is going to be here. They have to see me in the finest from France. They have to see me in the finest from America, from London. But he chose Tshepo Jeans. After those two transformational events, everybody ran over to Tshepo. Tshepo, we want Tshepo Jeans. Tshepo says they are available for 2,000 rand. Because a lot of us, we waited to be validated by the outside instead of taking the validation from among us here. So these top 16 brands today, the top 16 brands, they're not going to succeed if we are still going to abdicate, if we're still going to deny ourselves. I don't have a problem with the 83 brands which dominate the list, which include Ferrari, Gucci, Chanel. I don't have a problem with them. The problem I have is with us. And the reason I have a problem with us is we've given all the global brands, the non-African brands, a free rein in our continent. So we have not quite come back from Gore yet. We are still on that ship in America, in those fields, digging in America, because we are still looking for validation out there. What we lack is the courage or the vision of a man like Dangote, the number one brand that symbolizes African pride in our survey this year. And I understand why. When you walk around in Lagos, you go to the market, you go to those congested markets, and they're selling flour, and they are selling oil, they're selling cement. They have a picture of Dangote. They have the brand Dangote. Because you see, they don't reject Dangote, because Dangote is a mirror of what they can be when they put in effort themselves. So, this year was quite interesting because out of the top 100 brands, 2 brands were created only 3 years ago. Out of the top 100 brands in Africa, 2 brands among the 100 brands, among Nike, among MTN, Ethiopian Airways, I'm speaking mega brands, among Dangote, 2 brands, Drip and Batu. I've been on a road show across the continent. As those who follow me probably know, I've been everywhere. I did 6 countries in 10 days in the last 2 weeks. From Nigeria to Cote d'Ivoire, twice to Ethiopia, to Lesotho, to Namibia. Probably missed 1 or 2 there. And the interesting thing on those trips, they've all said to me, how did Drip and Batu get into the list? I said, quite simple. During COVID, when all of us were trying to make money out of PPE, during COVID, when all of us were looking for shortcuts and looking for governments to give us 350 rand, Lekau and Theo each opened over 20 shops. But they did something even better. They realized that if they had to go to Total Sport, to Sports Scene, to ask for permission to exist next to Nike, next to Reebok, next to Adidas, they were going to be put at the back of the. So they decided, let us own the entire value chain. Not only should we create the brand and design it, we should also create the space where our people can come and express themselves and spend their dollars. You see, brands do a few things for us. When we spend our money on our brands, among our people, we learn a lesson that we should have learned a long time ago. Because you see, with Black people, with African people, Africans, our money only does one cycle. Matter of fact, that is cycle out. Whereas with other cultures, they found a way to make the circle bigger with their money. When we buy, support, and build African brands, we are building our countries. We buy and sell African brands. We are building our own roads. We're building our own hospitals. Because you see, what happens now is, for a country that in 2009 didn't have that much debt, we now are owned by the West. A country that was on a trajectory up is now at the back and forth, begging money from the Chinese, from the IMF, from everybody else, because we have stopped creating. We have stopped thinking. We have become a nanny state. There is no better way to get out of this than to build great brands. And when we build great brands, we have to build them like only Africans can. So I arrived at about 2 a.m. in Senegal, and I drove all the way to the Gambia. I arrived at about 3 a.m. At the Gambia. And then I did not have, and I didn't realize I didn't drive myself, we had a driver, and we rented a car with a driver. And when we got there, we realized that we did not have insurance to cross over. And we asked the guy, and the guy said, the immigration guy said, you guys will need insurance to cross over. And we're like, at 5 a.m. So now my South African head kicked in. If I had to stop somewhere at 5 a.m. in the Republic of South Africa and ask somebody to find me insurance, I will see my mother in daylight. The guy said to us, hold up 1 second. Let us get into a car. Let us go get you insurance. So I left my friend TK and Dales. We drove about 10 minutes. We arrived at a place, dark, dingy, torching with cell phones. And somebody was writing up policies. My South African mind kicked in. They must be writing fakes. So I didn't quite understand when he said we have run out of policies. But you can go next door. So we walked next door and we knocked and we arrived at this other dingy place. Still in the morning, 5 o'clock, dark, hot as hell, Senegal, Gambia-Senegal border. And the man opened the door for us. And he said, let me go find an agent for you. So we went to another small shanty. I'll call you South African language shanty. He opened the door. Some guy was sleeping there almost butt naked. Because it's hot as hell if you know that part of the world. And he says, if you can just wait for me a little bit, let me just go get ready and meet me there in the foyer. The foyer is a stoop. He went and brushed and then did his salas and then came back and then he proceeded to write insurance policy for me. You see, the thing that defines us as a people is that entrepreneurship. It is part of our DNA. We do not struggle as Africans to be entrepreneurial. We're all selling magwenya, snook, and all those things growing up. We do not suffer from ingenuity. We do not suffer from making a plan. Because how else do you explain a mother in a township who works in some suburb house and earns 1,500 or 2,000, whatever, and sends all her kids to university to become teachers, doctors, and professors? Because us Africans, us and Jesus, we're like this. We can turn those 2 fish into But for us to arrive in the promised land, I challenge us that we need to use brands. Because brands create companies. Companies employ people. The people pay tax. The tax builds the country. It is that simple. So when you see a brand builder, you are seeing a nation builder. For us to progress, we're going to have to do it the African way. And the African way is embedded in these few quotes as I close. One is by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Ngugi wa Thiong'o said, if a man can express themselves well in a foreign language, but cannot speak their mother tongue, they're enslaved. So many of us, we're very proud that we speak English so well. We speak French so well. We speak Spanish so well. But when you go to France, have you noticed how proud they are about how well they speak French and how they couldn't care less how bad their English is. But an African is the first one who's going to correct you when you make a mistake, when your accent is problem. Tebo funde logish. You know that accent. I heard somebody say earlier today, especially. We understood what she meant. It is our English. Matter of fact, our copywriters should be putting especially in their copy because a lot more people will understand. So we need to learn and to appreciate our languages. So how beautiful it is. When Ravella stood here, the first things that she did is to express herself in her Tshivenda language. The second thing that we need to learn as we build great brands is from Chinua Achebe, who said, until the lion learns how to tell its own story, tales of the hunter will always be glorified. So a lot of us here, we need to learn to become champions, ambassadors, storytellers of African brands. Today's event is about the lion learning to tell its own story. Because as Ngugi would have reminded us, if you want to turn Africa into Europe, then we must leave it to the Europeans because they know how to do Europe better. What we know how to do well is Africa. As Fela said, you can't sing African music in proper English. Our job is to know ourselves well, to stand in front of the multitudes and to proclaim who we are. Ke mina Thebe, noko enchonyana, ke namane ya tholo, enaka enchocho, enaudima phata, erinye khata bojang, bosale boletana, ke mankwe, o ringa jamogo, ase aolachwa, cheche.
No,